I never thought the day would come when my own children would look me in the eyes and tell me I was finished, but I remember it clearly the moment everything inside me shattered. It was a Sunday afternoon. We were all sitting in my living room. My son, Adil, had just returned from Dubai, and my daughter, Sana, sat across from me with her arms folded, her husband whispering something in her ear every few seconds. I didn't know it then, but they were preparing an ambush. "Dad, we need to talk," Adil said, glancing at his sister. I smiled, thinking maybe they had planned a surprise for my birthday, or something small like that. I was wrong, very wrong. Sana leaned forward. "It's time you hand everything over to us, the properties, the accounts, the shop." My heart froze. Why would I do that? I asked. Adil sighed loudly, like my question itself annoyed him. "Because your time is over, Dad. You're too old to run anything. You're slowing us down. You should retire. Just sign the papers." I looked around the room, my home, and suddenly it felt like I didn't belong there. My daughter-in-law stood by the door, arms crossed, staring at me like I was a burden. My son-in-law smirked under his breath. Even my own children acted like I was some obstacle standing between them and their next luxury purchase. I felt something inside me crumble. All the years, all the sacrifices, all the nights I worked double shifts so they could study, travel, and leave better than I ever did. None of it mattered, not to them. I tried to laugh it off, tried to reason. "I'm not dying. I'm not helpless. Why are you talking like this?" Sana snapped. "Because you don't see it. You're outdated, Dad. You don't understand business anymore. Just sign the documents." And then the final blow. Adil pushed the papers toward me and said, "Dad, you're done. Move aside." Those words sliced through me. I sat there quietly, but what they didn't know was that this betrayal would ignite something inside me, something they never expected, and it would lead to a $50 million empire. To this day, they still regret what they said in that room, because they woke up a version of me they couldn't control. My name is Imran, and I'm 62 years old. I've spent my whole life working with my hands, building a small business from scratch. It wasn't glamorous, it wasn't huge, but it was enough to feed my family, educate my children, and keep a roof over all our heads. Everything I ever did, I did for them. My son, Adil, was always the ambitious one. As a child, he would tell everyone he wanted to be a millionaire before 30. He wasn't afraid of hard work, but somewhere along the way, he started believing shortcuts were better than effort. Once he moved to Dubai, his entire personality changed. Expensive watches, loud opinions, and a habit of speaking like he knew better than everyone else. My daughter, Sana, was different. She used to help me at the shop when she was a teenager. Sweet-hearted, calm-headed, soft in her tone. Until she married Cameron, a man who believed money made you superior automatically. Cameron saw me not as a father-in-law, but as a stepping stone to a lifestyle he wanted. He knew I owned properties, land, and the shop. To him, I was a bank walking around in old clothes. My son-in-law wasn't alone. Adil's wife, Hira, had the same mindset. The moment she stepped into our home, she started comparing everything: furniture, curtains, even teacups, with what she saw on Instagram. My simple life embarrassed her. She treated me with a kind of polite disrespect. The kind you can feel even when the words sound sweet. But I never complained, never. Because I believed time softens hearts. I believed they would eventually understand my sacrifices. For decades, I ran the same shop my father gave me. I repaired electronics, sold small appliances, and later expanded into wholesale supply. It wasn't massive, but it was stable. I saved quietly, invested wisely, and built a safety net for my old age. I never told my children how much I actually owned. Maybe that was my mistake. Maybe I should have, because in the last 2 years, something changed in my home. I started noticing glances exchanged between Adil and Sana. Quick whispers that would stop when I entered the room. Questions about my health, my energy, my workload, but not in a loving way, in a calculating way. One night, I heard them talking softly in the kitchen, but when I stepped closer, the voices stopped. That was the first moment I felt something was coming, something I wasn't prepared for. As months passed, the distance between me and my children grew wider than ever. Not just emotional distance, physical too. They stopped visiting unless they wanted something. They stopped asking how I was doing. They stopped sharing anything about their lives, but they didn't stop one thing: judging me. Adil would come from Dubai once every few months and start his lectures. Dad, your business model is outdated. Why don't you sell the shop? You should let us handle things. You're too old-fashioned. I laughed the first few times. Old-fashioned, maybe, but I had survived 4 recessions, inflation storms, and every crisis life threw at me. Meanwhile, he barely understood the basics of running a business without borrowing heavily. Sana's tone shifted too. She used to greet me with a hug. Now she greeted me with criticism. Dad, you should dress better. Dad, the house looks dull. Dad, are you sure you're managing your finances properly? Every sentence felt like a reminder that I was getting older, but it wasn't just them. Their spouses played a huge part. Cameron once said, thinking I didn't hear, if your father-in-law gave you your share early, we could invest it. Share of what? I was still alive. I wasn't dying. Another time, Hira complained loudly in front of Adil. I don't want us wasting years waiting for inheritance. That's not a plan. Those words pierced me. Inheritance? Is that all I was worth now? I started observing more closely. The expensive gifts I gave them meant nothing. The dinners I paid for were taken for granted. They only cared about the big things, the properties, the accounts, the shop. One evening, while organizing old files, I walked past Adil's room. He was on the phone with Sana. I froze when I heard his words. We need to do it before year end. Otherwise, Dad will change his mind. Do what? What were they planning? I quietly stepped back, heart beating fast. I didn't confront them. I just listened from a distance, but they spoke too softly for me to catch details. Still, I heard enough. Enough to know they weren't talking about my well-being. They were talking about my assets, and for the first time in my life, I felt afraid of my own children. My suspicion became reality one Sunday afternoon, the day everything changed. Adil had just returned from Dubai. Sana and Cameron arrived shortly after. Even Hira was there, standing stiffly in the living room as if she owned the place. I didn't know why everyone had gathered at the same time. It felt strange, planned. I offered them tea. No one accepted. Adil was the first to speak. Dad, we want to talk business. Business, my eyebrows rose. What business? He exchanged a look with Sana. That same silent communication I had noticed for months. Sana leaned forward, arms crossed. We've all discussed this. It's time for you to retire. Retire? I blinked, confused. I'm not retiring. I'm healthy. I still work every day. Why would I retire? Adil sighed like he was tired of explaining. Dad, you don't understand. You're slowing things down. You don't know modern strategies. You don't know how to scale. If you keep running things, everything will fall apart. My heart tightened. This wasn't concern. This was pressure. Then Sana dropped the main bomb. We want you to transfer the properties and accounts to us now, so we can handle everything. It's better for the family. Better for the family. Or better for themselves. I tried to laugh it off. You two are joking, right? Why would I transfer anything while I'm alive? Let me enjoy a few more years. But they weren't joking. Adil pulled out a folder from his bag and placed it on the table. Inside were papers, legal papers. Cameron finally spoke up, voice cold. We talked to a lawyer. Everything is ready. You just have to sign. My stomach dropped. They had planned this behind my back, quietly, strategically, as if I didn't matter. Hira stepped closer. You should rest now. People your age don't handle stress well. People your age, that was the line that broke me a little inside. I pushed the papers away. I'm not signing anything. The room exploded instantly. Adil slammed his hand on the table. Dad, stop being stubborn. Sana raised her voice. You don't know what you're doing anymore. Cameron muttered. We shouldn't have given him a choice. Their voices echoed through the room like thunder. My own children, speaking to me like I was useless, like I was an obstacle in their way. I stood up slowly, chest tight. You're not taking anything from me, I said, but Sana's response chilled me to the bone. You don't have a choice, Dad. We're not letting you ruin our future. Her future. What about mine? At that moment, I saw the truth in their eyes. This wasn't love. This wasn't care. This was greed. Pure, sharp, ugly greed, and the worst part, they felt entitled to everything I had ever built. I walked away from them, heartbroken in a way I had never felt before. What I didn't know then was that this confrontation was only the beginning. The betrayal had just started. The day after that explosive confrontation, the atmosphere in my home became thick with tension. Adil and Sana weren't hiding their intentions anymore. They kept pressuring me, texting, calling, and dropping by unannounced. One afternoon, Adil showed up with Farouk, our family lawyer, someone I had trusted for years. I thought maybe this meeting would bring some clarity, some calm. I was wrong. Farouk sat across from me, flipping through the documents Adil had handed over. Imran, we're only trying to protect the family assets, Farouk said smoothly. With your signature on these papers, everything will be secure. No one can challenge it later. His words were like a dagger disguised in silk. Protect or give them control while you're still alive. I asked quietly. He smiled politely. We're just following the law. This is standard procedure. Think of it as a retirement plan. I shook my head. Something wasn't right. This felt like a trap, like they wanted me to sign blindly, without fully understanding what I was giving away. Sana then added, her voice sweet but sharp, Dad, you don't want to worry about business anymore. Let us handle it. But I saw the hunger behind their smiles, the greed in their eyes. They tried to convince me, telling stories about how they were protecting my legacy from outsiders, how I was too tired to make decisions, how signing the papers would be the best gift I could give the family. I sat quietly, watching their faces, trying to keep my calm. Then came the moment they hoped for when I hesitated. Adil leaned closer, eyes intense. If you don't sign now, we'll have to start legal procedures. It'll be messy. I felt cornered, but just as I was about to respond, my phone buzzed with a message from an old friend. Be careful. Don't sign anything without a second opinion. That night, Farouk called me privately. Imran, be careful. This isn't as simple as they make it seem. His warning confirmed my worst fears. They weren't protecting me. They were trying to steal everything slowly, quietly, legally. The betrayal went beyond legal tricks. It spilled into the lives of those around us. A week later, there was a family gathering. Relatives, old friends, neighbors, everyone was there. I thought maybe it would be a chance to mend things, to feel some warmth. Instead, it became a stage for my children to humiliate me. Adil loudly announced in front of everyone, my father is a good man, but he's stuck in the past. He doesn't understand how business works anymore. Sana added, loud enough for all to hear, he refuses to modernize. He's holding us back. I felt my face burn with shame. Whispers filled the room. He's outdated. Poor old man. When will he step aside? I wanted to shout, to defend myself. But the words caught in my throat. For years, I had been the backbone of this family, and now I was the punchline. One of my old friends approached me quietly, placing a comforting hand on my shoulder. You're not alone, he whispered, but the damage was done. I left the gathering early, tears stinging my eyes. That night, I didn't answer calls or messages. I disappeared. For a whole day, I stayed inside my room, alone with my thoughts. My heart was broken, my spirit crushed, but somewhere deep inside, a tiny spark began to glow. The silence was the loudest thing I had ever experienced. In that quiet, I found clarity. I refused to be their victim. I was not done. I opened an old, dusty box hidden in the attic, a box filled with memories, old receipts, business plans, and notebooks. One notebook caught my eye. It was full of ideas I had scribbled years ago, dreams I had shelved because life got in the way. Flipping through the pages, I felt something awaken, a plan, a new beginning. I remembered my first passion, electronics repair, and how much the market had changed. Why not start fresh? Why not prove them wrong? I reached for the phone and dialed a number I hadn't called in years. Ahmed, it's Imran. Ahmed was an old business partner, someone I trusted completely. I need your help. I knew the road ahead would be tough. But for the first time in months, I felt hope. This was my chance to take control back, and this time no one would stand in my way. After that call to Ahmed, everything shifted. He arrived at my house the very next morning, old friend with a familiar smile, ready to help. We sat for hours, talking through my old notebook filled with forgotten ideas and dreams. The world had changed: technology, markets, customer habits, but the basics stayed the same: hard work, good products, smart plans. Ahmed believed in me when my own blood had already turned their backs. We laid out a plan, start a new business in tech repair and sales, tapping into the growing demand for affordable, quality services. I had the skills, the experience, and most importantly, the drive. Meanwhile, the family continued their games, mocking my old ideas and small ambitions when they heard rumors of my secret meetings. But I didn't care. I quietly rented a small office space, far from the prying eyes of those who doubted me. The space was empty, but it was mine, a blank slate for a fresh start. Each night, I worked late, perfecting plans, making calls, slowly building a team. The hunger to prove myself, to reclaim my life, burned inside me, and this time I wasn't alone. Ahmed was by my side. Launching wasn't easy. Every day felt like climbing a mountain. I faced doubts, obstacles, and the sting of betrayal all over again. But I kept moving forward. My first big break came when a local electronics retailer needed someone to repair devices quickly and reliably. They took a chance on us. Word spread. Slowly but surely, more clients came through the door. With each success, my confidence grew. News traveled fast, even reached the ears of my children and their spouses. They whispered behind my back, surprised, almost afraid. "What is Imran doing now?" Sana asked her friends one afternoon. "He's starting something big. Heard he's making serious money." I stayed silent, letting their whispers feed my fire. I hired a small team, mostly young people hungry to work and learn. We weren't flashy, but we were efficient and honest. Clients came back, referrals grew. In just months, my little office became a hub of energy and hope. And then, the unexpected happened. A regional tech company reached out for a partnership, a deal worth millions. Suddenly, my small dream wasn't so small anymore. The moment the media caught wind of my story, everything changed overnight. Suddenly, I was no longer just the old man my children dismissed. I became a symbol, a man who refused to let betrayal define his future. Headlines screamed, "From rejected father to rising tech mogul," how one man defied his family's greed and built a $50 million business, Imran's comeback, a lesson in perseverance and pride. The interviews were strange at first. Cameras focused on my tired face, questions about how I started from nothing again, and how I handled the pain from my own family. But the pain that had turned into fuel. The business grew faster than I had ever dared hope. We secured contracts with local retailers, regional tech companies, and even government suppliers. Clients trusted us because we delivered honest, reliable service. Every successful deal, every handshake felt like a victory, not just over the business challenges, but over the betrayal that haunted me. I remembered the day the $50 million deal finally came through. It was a partnership with one of the biggest tech distributors in the region, a dream for any small business owner. Ahmed called me early that morning, excitement clear in his voice. "Imran, this is it. The deal is ours." I sat quietly for a moment, absorbing the weight of those words. $50 million, more than I ever imagined I'd manage in such a short time, more than what my children thought I was capable of. I felt a mix of emotions, pride, relief, and a deep satisfaction. I didn't want to celebrate loudly, that would be petty, but inside I was triumphant. Word started to spread in our community, and soon even distant relatives heard the news. The same people who had whispered behind my back now looked at me with a mix of shock and respect. At family gatherings, Sana's voice cracked when she mentioned me to her friends. "Can you believe my father is running a $50 million company? I never saw this coming." Adil's smug smile faded every time someone brought it up. Their arrogance turned to silence, yet I refused to gloat or rub it in their faces. This victory wasn't just mine. It was proof that no matter how hard life hits you or how low those closest to you may push you, you can rise again. When my children finally reached out, asking to meet, to talk, to make things right, I was calm. I wasn't angry. I was ready. They had underestimated me. They thought I was done, but I was only getting started. And this time, I was the one holding all the cards. The calls started slowly. At first, just a text here, a message there. Then more frequent. Emails, phone calls, even messages through friends. My children, the very same who had pushed me aside, now wanted to sit down and talk. Adil was the first to send a formal message. "Dad, can we meet? We need to discuss family matters." Sana followed soon after with a similar tone but an added plea for forgiveness. Even Cameron and Hira, once cold and distant, were suddenly soft in their words. I could feel the desperation behind the polite requests. Their businesses were struggling. The lavish lifestyles they'd grown accustomed to were now hanging by a thread, and I was the one with the power to pull the plug, or extend a hand. I agreed to meet, but I was calm. No emotions, no anger. Just a steady resolve. The day of the meeting arrived. We gathered at my new office, the place they had once mocked. The room was filled with an awkward silence as they shuffled papers and avoided my gaze. "I know we've made mistakes," Adil started, "and we want to fix things. Please, Dad, let's move forward." I looked at each of them carefully, feeling the weight of years of betrayal and pain behind their words. "I have something to show you," I said slowly, reaching into my briefcase. I pulled out a thick envelope, the original copy of my secret will and property deeds, carefully drafted years ago and kept with my trusted lawyer, Farouk. Their eyes widened as I laid the papers on the table. "You think you had control over everything. Think again. This will was updated after I suspected your intentions. It leaves the majority of the assets to those who stood by me loyal friends, my employees, and charities." The room went cold. I could see the disbelief, the panic, the regret beginning to surface. They had gambled on my weakness, but I had planned my defense all along. Just as the tension reached its peak, I handed them a letter. It was from Farouk, the lawyer, detailing the legal consequences of their actions. The letter explained how their attempts to pressure me into signing papers were documented, and how I had taken precautions to protect the assets legally. It made clear that any fraudulent attempts to claim inheritance would be contested vigorously. Sana's face paled. Cameron's usual arrogance was replaced by a nervous glance toward the door. Adil tried to speak but found no words. They finally understood that their greed had consequences. The in-laws whispered among themselves, panic growing with every passing second. I watched them, feeling a quiet satisfaction, not from revenge, but from justice served. They had crossed a line, and now they had to face it. I stood up and faced them all one last time. "You told me my time was over," I said, voice steady but full of pain. "You said I was useless, outdated, a burden." Their eyes dropped. "You treated me like I was already gone before I even left. But I'm still here, and I'm stronger than you ever imagined." Tears welled up in my eyes. "I sacrificed everything for this family. I built this life for you, and all you saw was something to take." The room was silent, thick with guilt and regret. Finally, Sana broke down. "I'm sorry, Dad, we were wrong." Adil nodded, unable to speak. I looked at them, feeling a mix of sorrow and relief. They had learned their lesson the hard way. But I wasn't sure if forgiveness was in my future. Sometimes love isn't enough when betrayal runs this deep. After the storm had passed and the dust settled, I knew I had to take control, not just of my business, but of my life and family. I spent days meeting with Farouk and Ahmed, carefully restructuring my assets to ensure what I had built would be protected from further greed and betrayal. It was painful to do, but necessary. I transferred ownership of the business shares and properties to trusted friends and loyal employees, people who had stood by me through thick and thin, those who never asked for anything but gave their loyalty and hard work. Friends like Ahmed, who had believed in me when my own blood doubted, were now partners. My employees, many of whom had been with me for years, received shares as a token of gratitude for their dedication. It wasn't about revenge. It was about fairness and trust. As for my children, I made the decision to keep them at arm's length from the core of my empire. They would receive a small portion, enough to remind them of what they once had, but not enough to control or manipulate. The weight of that choice pressed heavy on my heart, because even though they had hurt me deeply, they were still my children, but boundaries had to be set. One afternoon, as I signed the final papers, my phone rang. It was Sana. Her voice trembled as she said, "Dad, can we please meet? I want to apologize. We were wrong. We miss you." I didn't answer right away. Instead, I looked around my office, the place I had built from scratch again, and I felt a strange peace. I knew forgiveness wasn't a given. It would have to be earned. But maybe, just maybe, it was still possible. Days turned into weeks, and weeks into months. I started living a life I had never allowed myself before, a life not defined by the constant struggle to prove something to others. I traveled to places I had dreamed of seeing but had put off for years. From the serene valleys of Hunza to the bustling streets of Istanbul, I found joy in simple things, new sights, fresh air, and quiet moments. My business continued to thrive, supported by the team I trusted. Clients respected us, and the community saw us as a symbol of resilience. Meanwhile, my children faced their own battles. Their lavish lifestyles were no longer sustainable without the support I had once unknowingly provided. Their businesses faltered, and they began to understand the consequences of their choices. I heard through mutual friends that Sana was working hard to rebuild her reputation, and that Adil was struggling to keep his company afloat. Despite the distance, I felt a quiet satisfaction, not out of malice, but because sometimes life teaches lessons in the hardest way. One evening, my phone buzzed again. This time it was Adil. He asked for a meeting, one last chance to talk things through. I stared at the screen, knowing this conversation could change everything, or nothing at all. But whatever happened, I was ready. The day of the meeting arrived. Adil came alone, a shadow of the confident man he once was. His eyes held remorse and his voice was soft. "Dad, I've made mistakes," he began. "I hurt you and I'm sorry. Can we start over? Can you teach me how to rebuild? Not just the business, but us." I looked at him and saw the boy who once dreamed of success, not the man blinded by greed. For the first time in years, I felt hope. But I also knew that respect and trust couldn't be rebuilt overnight. I shared with him what I had learned through the pain. Respect matters more than money. I told him quietly, "It's the foundation of any family, any business. You can have millions, but without respect, it means nothing." We talked for hours about failures, lessons, and what the future could hold. I promised to help him, but only if he was willing to change. This wasn't just about business. It was about healing the wounds that greed and betrayal had left. As he left that day, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. No matter what came next, I had reclaimed my dignity. And my family had learned a lesson they would never forget. Because in the end, respect matters more than money, and now they know it too.